I want to talk about something that nobody in the watercolor world seems to be addressing. And I think it's the number one reason your paintings might be feeling a little flat or muddy or just kind of lifeless, even when you think you're doing everything else right. And once I show you what it is, you're going to see it everywhere. And honestly, you might feel a little annoyed that no one told you sooner. So let's paint a flower together. Friends, today I am starting with a 3/4 inch dagger brush and my Art for Joy's Sake palette. Make sure you have 2 containers of clean water and something to wipe that brush on. My paper is kind of wide and not terribly tall, but you use what you have. It doesn't have to look exactly like mine, but we will be painting all the way to the edge of the paper. Now, I didn't forget, I will be revealing the biggest mistake you're probably making that's making your paintings look really flat. All right, my paper is dry and I have it loaded with a really watered down purpley blue. And I'm making a few strokes here. That's my first petal. Now I'm going into my second petal, my third, and my fourth and fifth, let's call it. Now let's slow that down and look at it again. I'm creating 5 petals, but each petal is made up of multiple very light paint strokes. This soft bluish purple contains not a lot of paint, but a ton of water. Some of the strokes are thicker, some are thinner. Rinse your brush, tap it lightly on your rag or paper towel, and load up some yellow and dab that into the center. The center you painted before should be dry, and so should the petals surrounding. If not, you're going to get a lot of yellow exploding into your blues and soft purples. Okay, rinse your brush again, and I want you to choose a green and a blue, and I want you to dab into them right after one another without rinsing. And then no more than 2 or 3 sweeps on your mixing palette, and then use the color that you grabbed from those few sweeps. Here we go. Press, drag, and lift towards the top of your paper. Don't overstroke this, and leave a little white in the center. Let's do it again. Press, drag, and lift. There's a slow lift and a slight curve as you paint there. And here's our third one. Press, drag, and lift. I want to go back to this third leaf now, and let's slow it down. Notice I grabbed a touch of purple. I didn't rinse my brush that had the green and the blue on it from earlier. I grabbed a touch of purple and went right to the paper to make that third leaf you see all the way on the left. Okay, it's really a hot pink, but it looks purple on the page. Now, I want you to go into comments and tell me what you noticed I didn't do after I grabbed that purple pink. That's right. I didn't mix it into my palette mixing tray. Next leaf, I am definitely rinsing my brush off camera here before I head into it. I grabbed a little pink, a little green, one right after another. No rinsing in between. I know for some of you this may be difficult, but I promise you, you're not ruining your palette. Then right down to the dry paper, and I'm creating one leaf, one little stem looking thing, a second leaf, and boom, beautiful. All right, let's slow this down again. I want you to notice the subtle variations of color. I want you to notice how that deep, dark, greenish blue at the tip of the first leaf at the bottom of your page lightly fades into just a blue, and then lightly fades into just a purple. Let's go back, and we're adding a 4th leaf. Friends, I'm just grabbing something on the mixing tray, just enough to grab it. Notice how you see green, you see yellow, and you see a little pink. Yours is going to look different because what's on your mixing tray is different. But the point here is don't swish and swirl too much on that mixing palette. All right, on the left-hand side here, press, drag, and lift, friends. And it's almost no drag, just really a press and lift. And I'm doing that a few times over. Now notice I'm starting to work next to the flower here. This is what's going to make my flower look white. This flower is dry, those purpley bluish shear marks that I made earlier, and now I can go right next to them and start to carve out the background greenery, which is going to be made up of some obvious leaves and then some not so obvious shapes, like on the left-hand side there, where the top 2 petals of the flower come together. I made a little triangle. All right, let's back this up, and I'm going to teach you exactly what I've been doing while I've been rambling here a bit. Important note, if you're now going to paint along with me, just notice I am not swirling my brush around a lot in that palette, and that is key. So keep that in mind as you're loading your brush with color. Going right where those two petals at the left of the screen come together, and I'm painting in an upside down triangle. And all of a sudden you notice the flowers starting to pop. Now let's head to the right side and start to add some greenery here. I'm doing a little tap with the curved side of my brush and then proceeding to create some press, drag, and lift, or as you see there, some press and lift to make it look a little bit more like tropical palm vibe. Friends, I need to note here, I have not rinsed my brush in a very long time. But that isn't the secret I talked about at the beginning of this video and all throughout. Notice I loaded my brush with about 3 or 4 colors. I never once went back to the mixing palette, and here I am trying to get that white flower to start popping on the page even more. Notice I'm just tapping in, stroking in some color, and I'm starting to carve out those white petals that are looking more and more white by the minute. I'm continuing on without adding any more color or moisture to the brush. I did a long tap, press and tap to create a stem, and then a few more radiating out from that stem. And then now I am doing a press and tap with a little bit of a side swipe to create these leaves at the end of each stem I just tapped on. Notice the gorgeous ombre of color, and it's happening naturally as I put some friction on the page. Going to the left side here and repeating the same technique. Tapping on with light pressure with my curved edge of the brush to create the main stem and then the radiating stems, and then a little press and lift with a side swipe to create these kind of angular looking smaller leaves. And now I'm just going to start going around the white flower and finding areas where I can intensify the existing color, like at the very top here with some linear detail on that leaf, and seeing where else areas might still be damp and I can drop in some darker color and let it spread out, like here on the left-hand side. Look at that. I'm actually filling in the leaves that look a little splotchy with a darker color and smoothing them out at the same time. Notice I grabbed a little blue again on a dirty brush, and now I'm adding that blue color in. Oh, I just grabbed a little green, purple, then blue. And I know you might be like trying to catch your breath to catch up to this, but I didn't add water after that green, purple, blue dip because I want this really intense color now. So I'm starting to step up the intensity of the color. And friends, I think it's time for me to reveal that secret, that thing that we're not paying attention to as we're painting that is truly causing your watercolors to look dull and flat. And that's because, friends, you might have guessed it, you're over mixing your colors. Now you might be thinking immediately, wait a minute, Christy, you are like not even rinsing your brush and that's what's causing muddiness. And I don't understand. I'm going to explain, stick with me. All right, let's back this up and slow down. I've got that intense blue, purple, green combo on my brush going on the right-hand side of the flower and adding a few press and lift strokes, maybe a little tap for a hint of a stem as you see on the top there. And there's not a lot of ombre of color here because I've got so much paint versus water on my brush. Now I am mixing on the palette there, but notice it was like 2 swirls. That was it. And there's another little tap for a stem and then a slow press, drag, and lift. And notice how I twisted that brush. The curved side of the brush was facing to the left. And that is giving me some different types of shapes with the same press, drag, and lift. Now I'm over on the left here, press, drag, and lift. I'm adding a little bit of pink to my brush. Again, didn't rinse the brush. No extra water here. I'm at the top adding some thick and juicy linear detail. Notice how close to the bristles I'm holding the brush, right at the base of the ferrule. That feels good for me for control. All right, let's really dive into this secret that I've just revealed because there's more to it and you need to understand this to really take full advantage of it. Number 1, this works well when the colors you're using are close to one another on the color wheel, meaning warm colors or cool colors. So if you're constantly going back and forth, dipping into your palette without rinsing, into pink and then green and then back again and pink and green, you're going to get a muddy, weird brownish green. That's going to happen easily. You don't want that. But if you're creating leaves, you can go back and forth between green and blue, and you could even add a little purple, and you're not going to get that muddy effect. You're not going to get the flat effect though, as long as you don't over mix in your palette tray, your mixing plate, whatever it is you use to mix your colors. Don't linger there. I always say, this isn't baking, friends. We don't need to mix thoroughly. And if you only hear one thing today, hear that. All right, let's continue on to see how I wrap this up. And I have one final reveal for you that you don't want to miss if you've made it this long. All right, now I am finally rinsing my brush because I am going to the center of the flower and I want to keep it clean. Grab a lot of yellow and a tiny bit of red or even orange, and your brush should definitely be just damp with that color. Head into the middle and start adding some small lines around that yellow center. To clarify, you want to add those tiny scratchy lines. They're not all going to look similar to one another around the perimeter of that flower center. And then just tap your brush onto a rag to get rid of some of the color that's there and add a little wonky circle to the very middle. If you've laid down those little scratchy strokes and that wonky circle dot in the middle and you feel like it's way too much color, you can carefully take a dry brush and lift out some of that color. It just means you had too much water and or paint on your brush when you made those initial marks. Now I am rinsing my brush again, loading up with a very watered down greenish blue. And this is optional. I'm adding some linear detail radiating out from the center of each petal where it meets the center of the flower down to the tip. I'm even dragging a little bit of that orangey color because it's still wet at the middle, and I think that is just lovely. Now, if you're trying to do that dragging, be careful. If your center is still extremely wet, let it dry a little longer. You want it to just be damp to do the dragging technique. All right, friends, I know this video will probably deliver a lot of aha moments, but they're probably laced with a lot of stress, and this is why I think so. Having a dirty palette is kind of seen as a bad thing. It's seen as very taboo in traditional watercolor circles. But I'm here to tell you, if it's done thoughtfully, if you don't rinse your brush thoughtfully. By the way, friends, I'm adding a little bit of darkness around half of that flower center with just like a blue, kind of just a dusty, dirty color from my mixing tray. Oh, and that's giving it so much depth. So certainly give that a try. But friends, if you refrain from rinsing your brush and you really hold back on how much you mix two colors that are close to each other on the color wheel, again, blue and green, or orange and yellow, or pink and red, or pink and yellow, do that for yourself. You are going to see your watercolor paintings explode with that whimsical, ethereal vibe. I promise you. Now get into comments and let me know what questions you have, friends, and I wish you so much happy painting till next time. If you want more encouragement to keep a dirty palette, watch this next.